It is rumored that after midnight, the world changes. The boundaries between reality and something else become thin. This story happened a year ago. My best friend Leo and I were celebrating his 16th birthday. We spent the whole day in the city. Pizza, arcades, movie. Time flew by. We lived out in the suburbs, 100 miles away from the city, and we had to catch the last train home. We sprinted onto the platform of the central station at 5 minutes to midnight. The station was almost completely empty, just the echo of our footsteps bouncing off the marble walls. The digital board glowed with our train, Route 113, departure at 12 a.m. The train was already waiting at the platform. It was an old, weathered commuter train. The doors hissed open and we stepped inside. We collapsed into the seats, our faces happy but exhausted. There were a couple of minutes left before departure and I looked around. The car looked normal, but something felt off. The fluorescent lighting was too bright, almost sterile, like a hospital. It had a low, monotonous humming sound. Right above the door, there was a metal plate with a stamped number, Car 113. Besides Leo and me, there were only 2 other people in the car. They were sitting near the very front, an elderly man in an old gray coat and a middle-aged woman sitting next to him. I noticed them because they were sitting unnaturally straight. They weren't reading newspapers or looking at their phones. They were just staring straight ahead at the empty wall. In all of the time we waited for departure, I didn't see them blink or shift their weight once. There was a strange coldness radiating from them, but I just brushed it off, blaming my own exhaustion. At exactly midnight, the doors slid shut. The train lurched forward and glided smoothly into the night. 10 minutes later, we left the city limits behind. The lights of the buildings vanished from the windows, replaced by the solid, impenetrable blackness of the woods. Occasionally, a lonely street lamp would zip past, casting long, dancing shadows through the cabin. At that moment, the harsh light in the car suddenly flickered and shifted into a soft, dim glow. The monotonous clacking of the wheels over the tracks was hypnotic. Leo had already closed his eyes, leaning his head against the cold glass. I tried to fight off the sleep, but my eyelids felt like lead. The quiet hum of the train swallowed me whole, and I drifted off. I woke up to someone shaking my shoulder. Hey, wake up! Our stop is next." Leo's voice sounded muffled. I rubbed my eyes, feeling deeply disoriented. The train car was completely silent, too silent. The man and the woman at the front were sitting in the exact same positions. I looked down at my wristwatch and I was stunned. It was 2 a.m. "Already?" I asked, confused. The trip usually took an hour and a half, but 2 full hours had passed. The train started to slow down. We were pulling into the second to last station before our town. The train screeched to a halt at the platform. The doors slid open. Freezing damp air rushed into the cabin. The train always waited at the station for 5 minutes to let a freight train pass. "I'm gonna step out for a minute, get some fresh air," I told Leo. He just nodded, staring blankly at the floor. I stepped down onto the concrete platform. The station was blanketed in the thick, heavy fog. A few dim yellow lights barely pierced through the mist. It was absolutely desolate. No station master, no cars in a parking lot, just a dead silence that made my ears ring. I stood by the front door of the train car, taking deep breaths of the cold air, and then a strange detail caught my eye. On the opposite side of the tracks, standing in deep shadow, was a figure. It was a tall silhouette of the man, and he was doing something weird. He was slowly, almost unnaturally, waving his hand at me. Curiosity overpowered my fear. I took a few steps forward, squinting through the fog, trying to make out his face. The closer I got, the more my stomach tied itself into knots. Suddenly, the man stopped waving. He lowered his arm, and then he started to laugh. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was a dry, grating sound, like metal scraping against metal. An eerie, maniacal laughter that echoed across the empty station. Then, he raised a hand with long, thin fingers and pointed right behind me, at the train. At first, I didn't understand what he meant, but the laughter grew louder, filling my head. In a state of panic, I spun around, and I froze in absolute shock. I almost fell to my knees. The train was gone. The massive, multi-ton metal train simply wasn't there. The tracks were completely empty. There was no sound of doors closing, no horn, no clacking of wheels. The train had vanished into the fog in absolute silence, as if it had evaporated into thin air. I spun back around. The silhouette of the laughing man was gone too. I was left completely alone in the freezing void. Panic consumed me. I sprinted toward the old terminal building, pounding on the locked doors, trying to find anyone. Finally, I found the night watchman in a security booth. I hysterically started asking him about Route 113, begging him to contact the dispatcher, screaming that my best friend was still on that train. The watchman looked at me like I was insane. The color drained from his face. What he told me next, I will never forget for the rest of my life. "Son," he said, his voice trembling, "Route 113 isn't running tonight. The tracks are closed." I didn't believe him. I kept yelling. Then he silently reached under his deck, pulled out yesterday's newspaper, and pressed it against the glass of the booth. The massive headline read, "Tragic derailment of Express Route 113. 2 days ago, that exact train had derailed at full speed, plunging off a bridge into a gorge." My eyes scanned the text. My breathing stopped. The article stated that there were no survivors. Among the officially identified fatalities were an elderly man, a middle-aged woman, and a 16-year-old boy named Leo. A year has passed, but I still wake up in a cold sweat. I am tormented by questions that have no answers. How did I even get to that station? If Leo died 2 days prior, who was I walking around the city with all day? And the most terrifying thought of all, who was sitting next to me in the train car? My best friend? Or something else? Something that took his shape to take me with it? And if I hadn't stepped out onto the platform for fresh air, where would the train have finally taken me?